the voice of the podcast Love to Heal, a journey of self-discovery, healing, and spiritual growth. Happy New Year! I'm so excited to share with you how I spent my winter break and recharged my batteries for the new year. Let's get to it. A few months ago, I started planning a little getaway for my husband and me. After having our second child, we hadn't gotten away, just the two of us, and I felt that it was time. December 23rd is our wedding anniversary, and so the Christmas weekend was perfect for us to travel. I had no idea where we should go, except that I preferred a direct flight and somewhere warmer than Cleveland, Ohio, preferably. I started looking around and found the option of Phoenix, Arizona. I had never been to Arizona, so that was already exciting. Plus, I had heard from a friend that in Sedona there are these energy vortexes, which also piqued my interest. I really wanted to connect with nature and spend some time hiking, so in the end, Arizona seemed like a good fit. And somehow it just felt right. After booking the flight, I started searching for itineraries, most of which recommended spending a day or two in Sedona. When I started reading about the city, it all made sense. I didn't choose Arizona. Arizona chose me because Sedona turns out to be the place to which people travel for spiritual awakening. I couldn't believe my eyes. Web page after web page described how thousands of people flock to Sedona for healing, energy work, and spiritual growth. At this point in my life and on my spiritual journey, this trip couldn't be more meaningful and special. Since I knew nothing of energy vortexes, I also decided to book a guided tour to learn all about these vortexes. I think I was honestly divinely guided to a webpage that listed many different tour companies and guides, but I was drawn to a specific one. Their name was One Tribe Tours, and they were operated by a husband and wife from Russia. I read their bios and loved their message, which immediately resonated with me since, like the name One Tribe, they believe wholeheartedly in the oneness of our world, that we're all connected and we're all love. When I went to book a tour with them online, though, it said that they're not available over the weekend, which was disappointing because that was the only time we had to take this tour. But that didn't stop me. I decided to reach out to them and see if they could possibly change their schedules and do a tour for us over the weekend. Lo and behold, they quickly got back to me and we booked a 4-hour energy vortex tour. Now, I was ecstatic as all the details about the trip were easily coming together. And when things come easily, it usually means you've made the right choices. When it came time to travel, I was tested from time to time with little setbacks here and there, such as our flight being delayed by an hour, but I made sure to stay positive and concentrated on love in all situations. So I know I passed those tests and increased love in my soul, because this was one of the most wonderful and unique trips I've ever had, from the beginning to the end. When you focus on love and look for love everywhere you go, you find plenty of it. And I, again, experienced this firsthand. And of course, don't forget to give love to all, as the more you give, the more you will receive. This means being extra nice to strangers, smiling, giving compliments, and thinking well about people, not judging. So I started the flight to Arizona by reading the book that turned up in my life recently that I talked about in my previous episode called Jesus and the Jewish Roots of Mary. That's the book that somehow turned up at the dance studio where I work. And after a couple of months of just sitting there and no one claiming it, I decided to take it home and read it. Since I don't know much about religions, this book was actually a great source of historical and biblical information for me. But, reading it through the eyes of a person who believes simply in oneness, which is me, that's the person I'm referring to, I still took away exactly the same old messages that I've believed in since the beginning of my spiritual journey and all the messages that I've been sharing in this podcast. And I think those messages were simply that our bodies are temples that contain the precious divine soul, and that God or the universe or Jesus and Mary, whatever you want to call that which you worship, always loves, always loved us, and always will love us. It's interesting, a couple of days later, I also stumbled upon Sadhguru's interpretation of Jesus's words. Sadhguru, if you don't know him, he's a world-renowned yogi and founder and head of the Isha Foundation in India. He gives a lot of talks, a lot of seminars on the topic of spiritual growth. He says that in his understanding, for example, the famous saying, turn the other cheek, means simply not to deviate from your path of love. If someone hurts you and you try to hurt them back, you're deviating from your path of peace and love. It's the same for all people seeking spiritual awakening. If you've chosen the path of love, then no matter what, do not become a reaction in your life. If you want to act in your life, do not react. If you react, you will get enslaved to somebody else. Remember, I've talked about this before. What reacts is the ego in us. The soul must take precedence if you aspire to grow spiritually. Reading that book on the airplane made the 4 hours fly by, and soon enough, we were in Phoenix. So the first day, my husband and I decided to drive to Scottsdale, which is only some 20 minutes away from Phoenix. There we walked around Old Town, admiring the southwestern architecture and nature. There were palm trees and cacti all around. It was really beautiful. And right away, we stumbled upon a really charming eatery, outside of which was a big blackboard with the words, "Love is ... written many, many times, and leaving passerbys room to fill in the blanks with a provided chalk. Of course, I had to leave a piece of me there, so I picked up the chalk and I wrote 2 sentences. First, I wrote, "Love is in your soul," and underneath, I wrote, "Love is healing." You can actually see this photo that I posted on my Instagram page. You can find it if you type in Love to Heal podcast. After our lovely stroll through the streets filled with shops, boutiques, and actually an awesome farmer's market with live music, we decided to have lunch at a famous pizzeria called Pizzeria Bianco. My husband and I love watching the Netflix series called Chef's Table. Every episode tells about prominent chefs that are inspiring in some way, that have inspiring stories and biographies. Whenever possible, we like to visit these chefs' restaurants. which we were able to do on this trip. The pizza that we ordered was very tasty, as was the mozzarella with peppers and basil. I felt that the simplicity and quality of this chef's cuisine, which he's known for, is applicable to my life, to life in general, for that matter. It's not the amount of stuff we own that defines our worth. It's the few most important ingredients or characteristics and their quality that makes us into loving and lovable human beings. I would say the main ingredients for a healthy, successful life are probably love, of course, in first place, which really is all-encompassing, but to be more specific, perhaps kindness, understanding, and patience would be among the top ingredients, so to speak, for me. After our lunch, we headed to Sedona, finally, where positive vibes abound. Since this is truly a spiritual center and a tourist destination, you can find countless New Age shops selling crystals, incense, and anything and everything you might need for meditation, energy work, sound healing, etc. Being the curious tourists that we are, my husband and I decided to get a chakra test at one of the local spiritual centers. The test consisted of looking at a poster of the 7 chakras, then stretching your arm out in front of you and resisting to the push, the downward push of the lady doing the test. This lady, she started with me looking at the first chakra, the root chakra, and she pressed down on my arm to see if she felt any wobbling or weakness or shakiness from me. And so she repeated this procedure with every chakra going up to the crown chakra. She was pleased with the results, saying that she didn't really feel any of my chakras out of balance. But then she asked me if I noticed anything, and I told her I felt a little shakiness at the throat chakra, which is where my anxiety used to reside, and sometimes still appears from time to time. She then recommended a crystal to me that is supposed to help balance this chakra and promote healing. The crystal she recommended was Amazonite, which happens to be my favorite color. It's a light turquoise, I would say. And this crystal is said to bestow truth, honor, and integrity to its wearer. It's also used to treat fatigue, trauma, or anything else that may take energy away from a person. And thanks to this trip and this chakra test and the meditation I will tell you about later, I finally understood why I've been feeling a sort of block in my throat. All my life, I've been a people pleaser, never speaking my mind, always preserving peace, telling people what they want to hear, not what I want to say. I feel now that I'm free to speak my truth, to say what others might not agree with, might not like, might judge me, or stop being friends with me. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I feel that I no longer need the approval of strangers or even people close to me. Now that I understand that the universe is in me, I'm divinely guided, I don't fear the disapproval of others. I don't depend on people's opinions of me anymore. And I can't tell you how liberating this is. Doing this podcast, speaking my truth, what I believe in, putting my loving messages out there has proven to be immensely therapeutic for me. And believing that someone out there may be benefiting from my story makes it even more worthwhile. But getting back to the trip, I want to also say that my husband, who has been such a great supporter of my spiritual journey, also ended up getting a crystal for himself after taking a test as well. And his crystal is a sort of a reddish color, and it's supposed to help with his second sacral chakra, which holds fears about the future and insecurities about life in general. So now we both have our crystals, and I put mine on my nightstand, and he likes to carry it around in his pocket. So hopefully the crystals are helping us balance our chakras. Then the following day was the most magical day in this trip, because that's when we finally went to the Vortex tour, and that tour was just magical. Where do I begin? It was very neat that our guide was Irina, a Russian immigrant like us, who, after living in the hustle and bustle of Brooklyn, New York, decided to find herself in the calmness of Sedona mountains. She told us the story of how she and her husband kept getting signs from the universe to become spiritual tour guides and help people heal with retreats and all kinds of counseling. Her story was nothing short of miraculous. All the signs she got from the universe were incredible. All the coincidences, all the déjà vus she talked about, it was really interesting. The first vortex that she took us to didn't have a name. It was simply a spot on a mountain overlooking the famous rock formation called Cathedral Rock. As soon as we got out of the car and started walking on the ground, I immediately started feeling a sort of bubbly sensation in my body, some kind of buzzing, vibrations. And the more we stood on that spot, overlooking a mind-blowing mountainous landscape, the more this feeling intensified. I literally felt like I was going to explode. And not too long after that, tears started forming in my eyes. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Irina said she felt exactly the same when she first came to this vortex. Some people feel these sensations in different parts of the body, while others don't feel much of anything. She said, whatever you're feeling, don't hold it in. Let all your emotions out. So I let the tears flow. I think they were tears of joy, because what I was sensing at the moment was the breathtaking beauty of the world we live in. I felt ever so grateful to God for giving me this opportunity, this body, to experience the wonder of life. Irina also explained to us that one way to know that an energy vortex is present is to look at the juniper trees. The trees and their roots are actually twisted at the side of a vortex. So you're probably wondering, what exactly is a vortex? Well, it is described and thought to be a swirling center of energy that is conducive to healing, meditation, and self-exploration. The Cathedral Rock formation that we were looking at was also a very interesting topic. Many people choose to get married at this site or overlooking it because this power vortex blends both male and female energies, the yin and the yang. So on one side of this rock formation, you can see a tall spire representing the male, and the spire behind representing the feminine energy. Native Indians see these spires as the male protecting the female while she supports the male power. So this was a very romantic spot where my husband and I took many pictures and just enjoyed the incredible views, which that day actually were extra special, as our tour guide explained, because the clouds were hanging really low over the rock formations and over the mountains, which is very rare. And it just made the whole landscape look that much more magical. So then we continued on to the next vortex, and this one involved a little hike through some interesting and even dangerous vegetation, you might say. We had to be extra careful not to touch any of the highly prickly cacti and extremely sharp leaves of the agave plant. Irina told us about the historical use of some of those plants and trees, how, for example, the Native Americans wove baskets out of the fibers of agave. And she gave us so much interesting information about how the Native Americans used the land and the plants. Then the path opened to a sort of cliff with many large puddles of water because it had just rained the day before. And all those puddles of water were reflecting the most blue skies you can imagine and giving way to a striking panoramic view of Sedona's red mountains and valleys. Looking out into the mountains that seemed to go on forever, with those clouds hanging really low, looked like a view out of a fairy tale. It was simply magical. I know I keep saying that word, but I just don't know how else to describe it. Looking out into the mountains that seemed to go on forever made it a perfect spot for meditation. So Irina guided us through some yoga breath work and movement, after which we started discussing how we felt, and I felt inclined to open up to her about my many years of anxiety and how I started my spiritual journey to healing. I told her again that I felt like crying, after which, I kid you not, a dam of feelings inside me must have broken because I started to bawl. I honestly don't remember a time in my life when I cried so hard. I was almost screaming as tears rushed in rivers down my face and into Mama Earth, as Irina calls her. I can't even begin to tell you how relieved I felt at that moment. I think I released years of suppressed emotions and feelings at that point, and I immediately felt lightness, and my throat opened up, allowing fresh air to enter my lungs and wash away any remaining doubts and fears about life in general and about my future and about the path I'm on. I felt so alive, I couldn't stop smiling. Irina pointed out to me the importance of acknowledging our emotions, such as fears, not just brushing them off or sweeping them under a rug while telling ourselves that everything is okay and to trust the divine will. The latter is obviously key to spiritual growth, but now I know that I can't ignore the human, the emotions our ego creates need to be addressed. They are there to identify an issue, and I need to learn to work through them instead of just dismissing them. She also spoke of past life regressions that helped her to understand certain fears or inclinations in this life. I had done a past life regression many years ago, but it was more so for the fun of it rather than therapeutic. So my plan is to give it another go once I find someone trustworthy and knowledgeable, and I will certainly report back on it. Finally, I will share with you the experience on the last stop of the tour on the vortex called Rachel's Knoll, named after a woman who was one of the first to feel the special energy of the vortex. She spent her life sharing the magical energy with others. And to make sure that this vortex didn't belong to any one person, she purchased the land surrounding it so that today this sacred spot continues to heal people from all over the world. Rachel's Knoll is her gift to all mankind. At this beautiful spot, Irina performed a smudging sage ceremony, which consisted of lighting a bundle of sage on fire and letting its smoke purify our surroundings, cleanse us of negativity, and give wisdom, clarity, and increase spiritual awareness. After this, we again sat to meditate as Irina guided us through a visualization exercise that helps to relax the mind and the body. She then took out a drum, which she played around us, healing us with sound vibrations. When I opened my eyes, I saw nature in a more beautiful way, which I didn't think was possible. That vibrant blue sky colliding with the fiery red rocks was imprinted in my mind. In fact, Irina said we can always go back to the vortexes just by recalling our experience. I think every time I meditate in the future, I will go to that place in my mind to raise my energy and vibrations. To say that this trip inspired me is to say nothing at all. I wish I'd planned more days in Sedona. But after the Vortex tour, we were also very tired. And perhaps it's a good thing that we continued to our next destination. On the road back to Phoenix, we stopped to marvel at the Chapel of the Holy Cross, which was built right into the mountains and is a sight to see. We also made it in time for the sunset in Phoenix. We climbed a mountain with a huge hole at the top of it, called Hole in a Rock. We were amongst probably hundreds of people that climbed the rock that night to see the sun go down. So it wasn't the most romantic experience, but it was really nice to see so many people appreciate nature and come together to experience the sunset on Christmas Eve. The following day, we chose Tonto National Park for a 3.5-mile hike up a mountain to see a waterfall. On our 40-minute drive there, we stopped at a little one-man stand that was selling all kinds of fresh fruits and veggies, and the sign was in Spanish, so I got to practice some of my Spanish speaking skills. And I chose some fresh piña and jicama and melon, and it was really, really tasty. We also passed many Indian jewelry and rock shops, as well as a mining ghost town, which was unfortunately closed due to the holiday. But soon enough, we reached the hiking trail and joined many other people that day on a stunning path into the superstitious mountains. First, we walked through hundreds and hundreds of cacti standing so tall as buildings, bearing many arms, which means they're over 100 years old. And the higher we climbed, the less cacti we saw, but the more agave plants and other various types of bushes with thorns. The higher we went, the more breathtaking the views appeared. I couldn't have picked a better partner than my husband to have hiked up that mountain. For several hours that it took us, we had the deepest, most spiritual conversations ever. And when we reached the top and found, instead of a waterfall, a trickle of water, we shared some laughs and jokes with other hikers. And life seemed so tranquil, so easy and fun at that moment. It's just incredible. When you're on top of a mountain, you feel like you can do anything. I can only imagine how people who climb the Everest feel when they reach the top. It's euphoric. And being able to share that with my soulmate made it that much better. In general, reconnecting with nature really is wonderful. When you're alone with nature, you feel part of it. Something within you reminds you how little in life you need to be happy. It puts everything in perspective. You start to question some of your life choices. For example, Irina mentioned that many people nowadays experience anxiety due to overstimulation of the abundance of not only electronics, but also activities. This is why so many people lost it, went crazy during the COVID lockdown. When you go from being occupied and somehow stimulated at basically all hours of the day to all of a sudden being stuck at home with nothing to do, people go crazy, literally. Instead of taking the free time to be with oneself, to meditate, to come up with ideas, using our imagination, we turn to the TV or the phone. This is how we lose ourselves. I often wonder if my kids need the 5 different after-school activities to keep them busy. Perhaps it would be better to teach them how to occupy themselves when they have free time instead of promoting the go, go, go schedule when there's barely time to reflect on what we've done and achieved in a day. What do you think? And please feel free to share your opinions in the Q&A section of the podcast. Irina recommended several authors to me that I will be reading in the coming months and reporting back in this podcast. So please follow Love to Heal for new episodes, and don't forget to share about it with your friends. And inspired by the Native American traditions of the Southwest, I will leave you today with a poem by Chief Seattle from the year 1854. Humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things connect.